So, in the past month, we've gone through a lot of changes of what schooling has looked like. We've gone from having classes that were face to face and that you would have designated times and designated lengths and designated assignments that were made for being in a class of multiple students, and that you could play off of each other and that the assignments could be done in class. But with the pandemic that is going on, education has taken a drastic change. So it is to the point where we cannot meet face to face with multiple students in a singular area. And so we as teachers have had to rethink the way that we are teaching. So we have had to convert a lot of the things that we typically teach into means that can be done over a computer. So using Google Classroom, using different video chat systems, using different resources that are all online, and changing it from something that we would teach you in the classroom to something that you essentially need to teach yourself or are very independent for. And so it calls into question what is it that we are doing with education, and how is education being looked at today? So we have had to do this massive change going from face to face to online. And it also brings into question, what should we be teaching you? What are things that are prevalent for today's society? And today's society is that we need to learn how to live more independently. Up until this time, we have been very dependent on those who are around us, the teachers, the parents, the society, being able to go to a supermarket and buy things. But what happens when those things aren't available to us? So these questions are really reforming the way that we think about education as we are doing it. One of my former principals used to say, we are building the plane as we are flying it, meaning that we don't know what's going on until we need it, or until we're in the situation, and then we need to address it. So here we are with this global pandemic, and rethinking of what education should be teaching, how it can be done, and things of the sorts. So this is not a new question. I mean, the circumstances are definitely new, but these are questions that have been asked throughout history, particularly in education, and it has been a particular focus for art educators. So the reading that we're focusing on today is Cognition and Curriculum Reconsidered by Elliot Eisner. We are starting on page 6 with Obstacles to Change. The thrust of my comments thus far has been to underscore the relatively feckless character, which means irresponsible or unthoughtful character of reform efforts, and to relate their overall importance to a shallow analysis of schooling and an uninspired conception of its mission. But clearly, it must be recognized that even with the deepest analysis, it would be difficult to change schools significantly. Schools are robust institutions. So like we mentioned before, the way that we are teaching today and the way that schools are organized has been done for essentially 100 years now. And to change that institution from the way it has been is very difficult. The funny thing is that this global pandemic has really it's forced us into reconsidering this education and the way that schooling is being done. Recognizing the sources of their stability is important if more adequate approaches to their improvement are to be created. It will be useful to identify some of the major foundation stones that make schools tough to change. For purposes of convenience and economy, I limit my attention to the following. First, the image of teaching, of classrooms, and what schools are like are learned early in life. teaching is not the only profession I can think of which professional socializations begin at age 5. As a result, those who teach have had years to internalize and set expectations regarding what teachers do and what schools are like. The way that I was taught is very similar to the way that education is today. It has not changed, and that's been over 30 years. To bring about significant change in schools requires, among other things, changing the image that teachers hold of their work. These new images are sometimes explored in teacher education programs, but the fact of the matter is that most schools, from young teachers' perspectives, resemble to a very high degree the school that they attended as elementary and secondary school students. As a result, the schools in which they teach often make it difficult for their new images of teaching to take root. A program in teaching education that advocates a collaborative approach to teaching or an integrated conception of curriculum, but there places prospective teachers in schools in which that sort of teaching is virtually impossible or in which curricular integration is extremely difficult, is unlikely to achieve the aims it seeks. So, most schools are organized that this is the math class, this is the reading class, this is the science class, this is the art class, and yada, yada, yada. And all these things are compartmentalized. They are put into these different spaces, these different times, with these different teachers. And most teachers are trained to only know the subject matter that they have learned throughout schools and become a master of or an authority of that subject matter. The thing is, if teachers are ever asked to do anything that is not part of their typical educational field, they become very unaware of the directions in which they should take it. So for schools to integrate or to be cross-curricular or incorporative, this is something that most educational systems do not do, for the simple matter of it's more efficient to have this the math class, this the science class, this the reading class, as opposed to having students and teachers addressing a full spectrum of ideas in one situation. A program in teaching education that advocates a collaborative approach to teaching or an integrated conception of curriculum, but that places prospective teachers in schools in which sorts of... Furthermore, young teachers are often counseled by veteran teachers to forget that they were taught in teacher-educated programs. Educational reality resides in the school as it is. Happily, the current push towards more collaborative relationships between public school teaching and university professors may ameliorate some of the difficulties new teachers encounter. So they're trying to pull these new ideas together and show how these things can cooperate. So even in our own school, we are taking steps where we can do cross-curricular ideas and things like that. But again, this is a long process that, without the current situations at hand, would take forever to change. If this, in fact, occurs, there will be, I believe, increased opportunities for significant change. Second, given the current structure of schools, teachers develop appropriate and invent forms of professional adaptations that enable them to cope with the numerous demands that constitute their professional lives. So, when we started teaching online, I was still following the same curriculum that I would have normally with you guys in my classroom. But as many of the administration and what I have heard many teachers say is that much of the administration is saying that we need to taper back how much information that we're giving you and present it in a different way, because of the fact that you guys were completely overwhelmed when we had all these assignments that we had to give you over online. So they're starting to realize how much pressure is being put on you guys. But the thing is, we are getting all that pressure from administration, from the state, from the nation, that we need to teach at certain levels and certain things, and you guys need to be aware of those things before you can pass on to a new grade or graduate. So to re-look at those ideas of what we need to teach, how much time we have to teach it, and what its important is really being reconsidered at this very moment. The appropriation development and invention of particular pedagogical techniques. So the way that we teach children, pedagogy, pedi mean children, gaji the way we think about them. Development and invention of particular pedagogy techniques, modes of classroom organization, procedures for providing information to students, ways of scoring exams, and methods for distributing opportunities to students within classrooms are all skills that teachers need to acquire in order to cope. These skills, once internalized, make it possible for teachers to focus on the substantive amount of their own pedagogy. Yet, many of these very same skills that make pedagogical survival possible are the skills that would be altered in a genuine reform effort. Thus the bind. Without well-entrenched repertoires, teaching cannot go forward. So if we teachers don't have all the information, all the skills, all the things, we can't teach you guys effectively enough. So knowing all these different things is super important for teachers.